Standing more than 4 hours because you stand at your desk?
I do.
This attorney argued that was badly advised to allow it go out with that notation on it, because that could be interpreted by some as a wink and a nod that it would be okay to go beyond the techniques that were prescribed in the memo.
There's no wink and a nod about anything. It was a semi-humorous remark that a person in his 70s stands all day long, and there was one provision in there that they would have people stand for several hours, and I just mused that, and maybe it shouldn't have gone out, but it did, and I wrote it, and life goes on.
He took it that way, but his point was,
Secretary, even mindful of your remarks in your opening statement, I have to try. What planning, if any...
Try and fail.
That may be. What planning, if any, has the Pentagon been undertaking for the possibility of military action involving Iran, and has the nuclear strike option been ruled out?
You know, someone comes up with an idea, runs it in a magazine or a paper, other papers pick it up and reprint it. Editorialists then say, oh, henny penny, the sky's falling, and isn't opine on this and opine on that. And to the extent anyone starts responding to the kinds of things that have been circulated, it's endless.
To a point where you really can make some decisions about drawdown.
When we have an announcement, we'll let you know.
Let me know first.
Not first, but we're fair, and we'll let everyone know at the same time. You should be very careful about quoting me.
You've already started. Fantasy land.
I used the word, but I did not use it specifically in the context that you're using it, and I would caution you to read very carefully precisely what I say, and not what you'd like me to say, or what you want other people to think I should say.
I'll use the president's quote.
When you're in a hole, stop digging.
All right.
The president, according to several books that you haven't disputed, said start planning, and
you think I'm going to stand around reading your books and disputing things in them, or validating or not validating? I've got a real daytime job. I mean, you'd do nothing else but that if you did that. The fact that I haven't disputed something is, I mean, if I disputed all the mythology that comes out of this group and the books of the world, I wouldn't have any time to do anything else. Woodward's book is not the Bible. Some of you may not know that.
Neither of you, again, have said whether or not this is a crisis for the Army.
Well, because that's a journalist's word. It's a headline word. We're trying to accurately describe precisely what's taking place, and that's what we've done. Rather than offer a headline like that for you, Charlie. I'm sorry, Charlie.
It seems to be a major problem.
The Marines are doing a 7-month tours. The Air Force sometimes doing a 3-month tour. The Army's been doing up to 12 months. And then you have volunteers who actually come in, put their hand up and say, we want to go back in and do X, Y, or Z. So when you start hearing rumors about people on their 3rd tours or 4th tours, you start checking into it and looking what you got. You're going to have people who may be in the Air Force who've gone back in on 3-month tours, or you may have people who volunteered because that's what they want to do. And I think there's always a risk when people grab into the middle of something, take the worst of what might be, and then wave it around as though it's reality.
Mr. Secretary, there are voices in the Congress and elsewhere, including some belonging to retired senior military members, who are calling for your resignation. The president says he supports you and that you're doing a good job. If that support continues, do you plan to stay for the rest of his 2nd term?
Ivan, those kinds of calls have been going on for 5+ years, and the president has asked me not to get involved in politics, and that's politics.
Are you still confident that the size of the U.S. force in Iraq can be brought down significantly this year?
Jim, I don't know how many times I have to answer this. The level of the forces, we'll try it one more time, all together. The level of the forces in Iraq will depend on the conditions on the ground and the recommendations of the commanders. And if you can predict precisely what the conditions on the ground will be and what the recommendations of the commander will be, I can tell you precisely what the trajectory, up or down or level, might be of those troops.
Column from Maureen Dowd in which he quoted an unnamed administration official saying that you don't hold the same sway in meetings and that you're treated as, quote, an eccentric old uncle who's ignored.
I see. You like to repeat all that stuff, don't you? On camera, did you get that? Let's make sure you got it. He loves that stuff. It's a sure way to get on camera. He'll be on the evening news.
I know that you like to have the facts in the premise of the question.
Yes, I do, and you did it very well.
You can
No.
do one-arm push-ups and put all
No,
this to
the
rest.
answer is no.
Recommendations initially came out, you had said that you hadn't made changes to those recommendations. The message that many of us heard from the commission to make major changes to that.
If you believe everything you read in Maureen Dowd, you better get a life.
I'll take that as a soundbite.
I understand. And I am not going to defend it because I don't have sufficient knowledge about what actually was done, at what level, by whom, and for what purpose. And I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like to engage my brain before my mouth. I must say that having a chance to see the lessons learned from the U.S. side and then looking at it from the Iraqi side, I found absolutely fascinating. I think it's a good piece of work, and it's fairly typical of the Pentagon to be willing to invest time and effort of thoughtful people to go back and see what actually took place and what did people think at the moment, and what can we learn from that so we can do things better in the future.
And in looking at that, did you discover any glaring miscalculations that the U.S. may have made going into?
It's fascinating. You have no interest as to whether they made any glaring miscalculations.
Well,
Isn't that an interesting phenomenon? We're increasing from 33 to 42 combat brigades. Well, wait a second. Are you going to let me finish or not? Are you going to let anyone else ask a question or not?
I will. Tony's gonna ask
That'd be
great
a
question.
whale of an idea. Why don't we
I'm
go
asking-
over here? This is the president's budget that's going to be announced next month. It's the quadrennial defense review, which we give to the Congress and the president. And rather than speculating on whether what the draft you saw was a late one or an early one.
It's in the report, though. And the report's the printer. I mean, is that a factual?
We'll wait and see when it comes out. Why don't you just report the news instead of what might be the news?
Might be the news.
In fact, I'm eager to. You know, if you stop and say, what's the single most important thing about the discussion on intelligence, one would have thought that rational people, responsible people, would have understood that it's trying to find the formula, the way, the structure, the arrangements, so that we can provide the very best intelligence for the American people so that they can be protected. That's what's central to this. And yet, if you look at the debate and the articles in the newspaper and the comments that are being made, they are about theoretical conspiracies. They're about theoretical bureaucratic turf fights. They're all off the mark. There's a saying for people who miss the mark consistently, and they say that person has an instinct for the capillaries.
Mr. Secretary, do you believe that the Guantanamo prison should be closed and the detainees put on trial, as President Bush stated in an interview with German television?
What are you trying to do? Position me opposite the president on this issue? The way you cast it?
Perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah, that's nice. Most certainly, I would say, would be a more accurate response.
You weren't happy with General Hayden back in 2004 when he testified that...
Oh, let's get right down into the minutiae. Won't that be fun? Let's not talk about how we get in good intelligence for the American people. Let's get down on who said what to when 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Is this an elevated network question?
I thought you could set the record straight about whether or not you were, I mean, because this is the source of some of the speculation that there's some tension in the relationship.
There isn't.
between
I just
generals.
said that.
What's being done to clear up the kind of misunderstanding and confusion that existed during Katrina over command of the military forces, both active and guard? Will those forces be put under a single commander in the event that they'd be needed for Hurricane Rita?
A single commander with the ones involved with Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama?
Right. Well, during Katrina, there appeared to be some confusion between the state and federal officials.
Oh, those are
the
issues between the White House and the governor. There was no confusion about the military chain of command.
I understand, but
None. Zero.
There are reports that two men who were detainees in Iraq, taken in July of 2003, they are now claiming that as part of their interrogation, they were thrown into a cage with lions. Can you tell us if any member of the U.S. military has ever threatened a detainee in that way, coerced them, tortured them in any way using lions?
I've read the same report. It seems quite far-fetched. People are obviously everything that everyone alleges is looked into, but you've got to keep in mind that the documents that were found, I believe in Manchester, train people, terrorists, to lie about their treatment, and they do it consistently, and it always works.
You're saying this has never happened?
I didn't say that. You heard precisely what I said. I spoke very precisely, and you can get a transcript of it if you really want to know what I said, and I'll stick with what I said.
You haven't had a chance to read his op-ed piece
No.
that he wrote in the Wall Street Journal
No.
back in April?
I know it's terribly important to you, Jamie, but I have a few other peas on my knife that
Do you believe that
how would I know if I ever spoke about it with the vice president over 5 years? I don't recall speaking with him about it, and I don't recall the department being involved. Is it possible? I mean, my goodness, that question is such a it's, what is that game? Fish. Give me all your sevens or something. I mean, that's not for me.
Secretary, what are the implications
He thinks I just fell off a turnip truck.
Is that anything you'd like to talk to the
No, what
American
you've
people
got
about?
is you've got an indictment pending, and then you have people who are going to have to work their way through those things. And it seems to me that opining on it from the side is not a useful thing to do or a particularly thoughtful thing to do.
If that's true, what would that say about stability in Iraq?
Comment on hypothetical questions. I've not seen reports that hundreds are being killed by roving death squads at all. We know for a fact that it's a violent country. We know for a fact that there have been various militias. We know that there have been some militias that have been Iran-oriented. We also know there's been some militias in the north that have been very helpful. The Peshmerga have been very constructive in what they've done. But I'm not going to get into speculation like that.
Mr. Secretary, in its lead editorial this morning, the New York Times takes issue with you and the Bush administration for the way the United States is waging this war, and
They
particularly
have done that almost every day since it started. If we're not going to hang our hats on that, a New York Times editorial, my goodness, Ivan, I'm stunned.
well,
There have been some critics who have said that you don't have enough troops to do this clear, hold, and build strategy, especially along the border between Iraq and Syria.
Can I just stop right there? Please, let me just stop right there. Anyone who takes those three words and thinks it means the United States should clear, and the United States should hold, and the United States should build, doesn't understand the situation. It is the Iraqis' country. They've got 28 million people there. They are clearing, they are holding, they are building. They're going to be the ones doing the reconstruction in that country. And we do not have, with 160,000 troops there, the idea that we could do that is so far from reality. Nor was there any intention that we should do that.
Senior civilian and military leadership in this building been working behind the scenes on the Hill to torpedo the Senate intelligence bill, and what are your objections to that bill, sir?
Well, Charlie, I think you probably know me well enough to know I wouldn't be doing that. The fact that the New York Times editorial says that I'm obviously lobbying against the president's stated policy is nonsense.
Mr. Secretary, some members of the House Intelligence Committee say that the Senate version of the bill doesn't protect tactical intelligence from the warfighter because it concentrates too much on overall intelligence. Would you agree with that, sir?
No, I'm not knowledgeable enough to agree or disagree. I am in supporting the president's position. I am a part of his administration.
General Myers made similar references to the failings of the insurgency, including support. And yet, this far into the operation.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, back to Iran. Is there a military option, or have the Iranians done a good enough job of hiding their facilities, protecting some deeply underground, that taking out their capability the way the Israelis did in Iraq in 1981 simply isn't an option?
I don't think my discussing that subject is useful. So I shan't.
I was wondering if you've seen Mr. Bremer's new book, and if you've had a chance, and wondered what your reaction is
You
to
people ought to
his,
get a life. I mean, goodness gracious, the questions you ask. I haven't seen it.
Well, apparently he says in the book that he thought there should be more troops in Iraq.
When you yourself as Secretary of Defense look at current contingency plans on the shelf, is there, you're not satisfied that they could actually be executed?
Absolutely not. I said nothing of anything like that. I didn't even come close to saying anything like that. And anyone who's listening, understand I did not say anything like that.
Apologize.
I wasn't even close.
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Well, let me ask you, don't you think that using that 136,000 number consistently, wouldn't that be a little misleading as to the capabilities of those forces?
A number does not give you capability. It gives you numbers. I said that in my opening comments here. And it can't be misleading because I've just said exactly what you've just said. Just let me finish. Numbers are numbers. Capability and capacity to do things are something other than that.
But the strategy for victory hinges on the Iraqis, and if the Iraqis
And it's going well.
don't step
Well, why
up,
do you keep taking the negative, Brett? Why don't you take the positive? What if they do step up?
if you have to hold that bicycle a little bit longer than you thought you were
Then
gonna
you
have to.
do. And you don't want to end up with a 40-year-old that can't ride a bike.
Do you plan to stay on, sir, for at least a year, say, or do you hope to stay on?
Charlie, the president has spoken on this issue. He went to Camp David. He's thinking about his administration for the future. I've met with him 2 or 3 times on totally different subjects since the election, but that's not a subject that's come up, and needless to say, either one of us would discuss it with the other before discussing it with you.
Well, would you say...
As much respect as we have for you.
Realizing that this is not simply, a simple metric to use, are you saying
It's not only not a simple one to use, it's an imperfect one.
Are you planning to go after any programs?
That's the question. That's the question you really were getting into, and I'll let you know when I get there.
That this is sort of the final showdown with the insurgents, and I guess I would.
Oh, on Fallujah, I thought you were talking about weapons program.
You cancel all the programs you want on Fallujah, whether this is sort of a final showdown. I think
I've
you
answered
said,
that.
Well, you
I
said
would not
you-
think of it that way, and I think it would be a mistake for anyone. Listen, these folks are determined. These are killers. They chop people's heads off.
You don't know exactly how many terrorists are still there. We don't even know exactly how many civilians are there. I mean, can you give us any sense if this is, are we going to see a number of Fallujah-type invasions as they move city to city? Is that what you envision? Or do you really think you could squelch a lot of the insurgency with this move today and this week?
We've answered that, but let me repeat it because it's important. No one can know the answer to that question. as to what we can know of certain knowledge is that you cannot have a country that is free and democratic and respectful of all the people in the country if you have safe havens for people who go around chopping people's heads off. Well, first I'd say I haven't seen the remarks, and I like to read. I certainly accept what you're saying is what you read. I don't know if you were there to hear him say it or that you understood the translation. Certainly I didn't. Therefore, I'm kind of old-fashioned. I'd like to see what he actually said, what the context was, and what the questions being raised. I find almost every day I see all kinds of mythology repeated in the press, day after day, of things that never happened. Just unbelievable what I see.
To step into the Sunni-Shia violence, is that the job of the U.S. soldier?
That's a very complicated question. The President addressed it yesterday, and I'd suggest you get the transcript of his remarks if you didn't see it.
I'm interested in your views as
I
Secretary
agree
of
with the
Defense.
President.
I'm extremely interested in your views.
I agree with the President.
Could you please articulate an answer?
You trying to find some daylight between the two of us?
I'm not in the least. I'm simply interested. I'm sure you have a very articulate answer.
You are, huh? Yes.
General Casey left open the door for adding more troops if he sees fit.
You know, that is, I think that's unfortunate to characterize it that way. If you ask me the question, is it possible there could be more forces? Yes. Is it possible there could be fewer forces? Yes. The headline is, Casey thinks there may be more forces. Now, is that, no, he didn't say it that way.
He would consider it, and he maybe
Listen, we're in the political season. You know that. And that's what's happening. People are trying to take what he said and turn it in a way that it plays the way they'd like to see it play. He didn't say he did not leave anyone with the impression that he was thinking about more troops or fewer troops or the same number of troops. He just gave a truthful answer.
When it was asked,
Ask him the second question. Could it stay the same? Maybe. Could it go down? Maybe. He would have answered the same way for every one of them. They're where he wants them. Think of that. Now, that is mischievous. I don't mean by you, but the environment we're in. What'd you say?
Casey, I mean, he's the one.
No, not by Casey. The concept is mischievous, but I mean that's what happens. Like, we're all adults. We know what's going on here.
May I ask a practical question, though, nonetheless? If he does,
implying the first one wasn't.
if he does come back to you and say, I think we need more troops, will you automatically support the recommendation? And have you begun to identify what troops could go? Or would you extend, or would you send more?
So first we have him implying, the way the press carries it, that there are going to be more troops. And then you have me explaining, yes, we're already studying which new troops we'll put in. I mean, come on, I didn't just fall off a turnip truck.
Why can't you reduce U.S. forces?
That's a rather accusatory way to put it. But I'm not leaving the impression anything other than exactly the facts. And I use that number because it's a correct number. I think it may be 307 or 312, but it's close enough. So it isn't going to be tied up with a ribbon and announced, there it is. That's not going to be the way it'll work.
You said it would be made public.
It will be. As they go along, I suspect. I'm not out there.
But you're not sure if the Iraqi government has agreed to this sort of process you laid out of setting quarterly targets, more or less.
I have made a practice of not speaking for foreign governments for 6 years, and I'm not going to start now. They will announce what they've agreed to. They will. All I know is what I hear from my people, that they have meetings, they go well, they're working their way through it. It's tough, complicated stuff, but we're making progress. The problem is the word it.
Benchmarks, to lay down benchmarks.
Don't go there. You say, have they agreed to it? Are they meeting and having discussions on these things? Yes. Have they been meeting for some weeks and months? Yes. Does that imply a certain amount of understanding that that process might be useful? Yes. But can I say that they, that is to say the Prime Minister and his government, have come down and said, yes, we'll do this, we won't do that, or yes, we will do this, we won't do that, and we'll do it by this time? No, one would have thought they might have announced that if they decided all of that.
So you don't know if in the end they will lay down benchmarks?
My impression is they already are, and that it is a process, not an event. I think that the tone of this group is to think of it as something that will be revealed or chipped in stone and announced by the Maliki government or by Zal or somebody, and that is not what it is. It is a sovereign country working with the coalition to see how we get from where we are through this year and through next year and accomplish the things that are in our mutual interest.
Mr. Secretary, can you blame us for the tone? Expressing some skepticism?
Well, I know. That's your job. You can express all the skepticism you want.
Benchmark has been laid down in terms of security forces and the like. The Iraqis have been unable to meet them.
That is just false. We should just a minute. That is false. Every time a security benchmark has been laid down, the Iraqis have failed to meet it. Wrong. Just isn't true. And it'd be a shame if people walked out thinking it. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. Now, why do I say it's wrong? Well, first of all, it has the benefit of being true that it's wrong. The Iraqi security force training program that we have laid out has been proceeding in a orderly, reasonable way. We have projections that we release to the Congress every month or two or three. We show them what we think we're going to have by way of training and equipping. We show them that the chain of command's been set up. We show them when the new divisions get chopped over, Iraqi divisions, to the chain of command because they have the capability of handling it. We've done it, 2 of them now. There'll be more coming along. We can't say precisely what day they'll happen, but it's all laid out there. We think it's working. They're doing a good job. When we said that they would handle the bulk of the security for the last election, they did. We were in an outer cordon. They were handling it in the inner cordon. They did a good job. The election took place. I mean, to say that every security, I mean, there's people ranting like that up on the Hill, but that is just wrong to say that. It isn't even close to being true.
Benchmarks in numbers, but not the ability to stand up and take control. It was evidenced here. General Casey said as much in the fight to retake Baghdad. That when the U.S. military called on the Iraqi military to provide forces to assist in that operation, they provided only a small fraction of what is needed.
Okay. Look at it this way. Have there been instances, many instances, when the Iraqi security forces have been able to do precisely what was intended and what was predicted? Answer, yes. Have there been instances where they were not able to do what was predicted and hoped for or intended? Answer, yes. That means your question, your statement, your assertion is flat wrong.
Am I the reason you get stoned every week now? Build up integrity, got you texting, emailing me, wanting me to feel with you. Baby, just face reality, move on. Sometimes it's hard to face reality.